Hi, Misha here, and a little bit ago we did a one-on-one video kind of looking at it as a buyer's guide on French guns. That went over pretty well, and a few have asked us to do more Japanese guns, which I'm always happy to do. They've kind of been a passion of mine for a very long time. So I thought, why not do a buyer's guide for Japanese Arisakas? So I've laid out four here that kind of represent four distinct generations of Arisaka. Now this is just going to be on rifles. The carbines could be a separate video. Also, this is just going to be the main production version, so no Type 2 Paratrooper or Type I Carcano today. So at the top, we have the original, the one, the only, Arisaka Type 30 rifle, chambered for 6.5 by 50 semi-rimmed. We have its product improved sequel here, the still called Arisaka Type 38, still also in 6.5. Then we move to World War II with the Type 99, which introduced the new 7.7 millimeter cartridge, 7.7 by 58 rimless, a recessed rim. And then finally we have the substitute Type 99, often referred to as a last ditch, and in 7.7. So the original Arisaka is a little different critter than later ones. Colonel Arisaka designed this in the mid-1890s. It was adopted in 1897 and went into production in Japan. It uses a multi-piece type bolt with a moving extractor and ejector up here. Very German Gewehr 88 style, if you're familiar with that. It's a relatively complicated bolt system, at least all things considered. And these are easy to identify at Bubba's old-fashioned pawn and gun because they have the hook safety. It can be pulled back and then put here to be on safe, and then hooked back there for fire. And I also like it because it means you can easily decock it softly. I don't like dry firing old guns if I can help it. It uses an internal 5-round mag that has a wire spring, coil type. Full length stock, has the distinctive upper and lower tangs, which reinforce. These are often, like most Arisakas, made from a 2-piece stock back here, both to save on wood and also to add strength. Overall length is about 50 inches. Barrel length is 31.5 inches, and it weighs about 8.7 pounds. So pretty standard for the rifle of its day, but it is kind of svelte compared to some others. We have a tall ladder sight set to very opportunistic distances, so again very standard for a bolt gun. Short upper handguard, typical sling swivels, flat steel butt plate, and this takes a blade bayonet known as the Type 30 bayonet, which would become standard all the way through World War II, and all of these will take a Type 30. And it has a brass tipped cleaning rod and unprotected front sight. The 6.5 cartridge did very well, and the Arisaka, considering the young age of Japan's industry, did well in conflicts like the Russo-Japanese War and the Boxer Rebellion, but they did find some problems and things that needed correcting. Thus, in 1905, the Type 30 was supplanted in military service by this model, the Type 38. Now, Colonel Arisaka did not work on the Type 38 upgrade. It was actually Kajiro Nambu of pistol fame. He took the basic design and really simplified the bolt system, going to more of a single piece bolt. It's actually a very brilliantly simple and overbuilt bolt. Took that hook safety and went to the round safety, checkered safety you're probably familiar with. Beefed up the stock a bit, still two-piece though. Still very similar rear sight, short upper handguard, front sight, cleaning rod, brass tip is gone now, same bayonet. Went to a leaf type spring, a sturdier spring in the magazine, and added a dust cover because one of the issues they were having was dust, dirt, snow, sand, whatever getting in the action, so a dust cover to protect it. Also elongated the cocking handle for easier use, and just generally improved the design. Now, this is a later production Type 38. I brought it out to show you some differences. Early ones were very much like the Type 30, but they would go to this cupped butt plate later in production. They would also go to what I call a concave safety. The early ones have a convex safety where it protrudes here. They would go to a peep or aperture rear sight. Early ones were still a notch like the Type 30. And they would start adding protective ears to the front sight. This is still about 8.7 pounds. It's just a tiny hair longer, but still basically 50 inches with just a tiny bit of change. With a 31.5 inch barrel. And this would be Japan's standard issue rifle during World War I, although of course plenty of older Type 30s would be in second line use. Again, that was a 6.5. In Japan, we continue to build the Type 38 in various versions and stuff through the 1920s and into the 1930s. But in campaigns in China, they noticed that sometimes the 6.5 were a great kind of long distance anti-personnel round, was not that great at penetrating any kind of armor or even thick clothing. So that led to the Type 99. First tested out in the late 30s and adopted officially in 1939. The Type 99 stands for the 2599th year of the Japanese Empire. It fired a new 7.7 by 58 millimeter round, based on the British 303, but it was rimless, whereas the British round had a rim. And you'll notice it's shorter. This is only a little over 44 inches long, has a barrel a little under 26 inches, and weighs about 8.1 pounds. This is a short rifle. Originally they were going to build these as long rifles and carbines, but testing showed that there was little advantage, so they compromised with the short rifle, and it seemed to be of no detriment. This is still based on the Type 38 bolt system, but they made quite a few changes. They did basically use different parts in different machining styles to streamline mass production. On the other hand, they made quite a few improvements, like going to a chrome-lined barrel and bolt face for use in tropical environments. We still have the cupped butt plate. Now we have, wrong side, sorry. My side, not yours. The sling swivels on the side for more mechanized use. Still have our checkered safety and plumb bolt knob. still have a dust cover. As is pretty famous, these also had anti-aircraft sights as a standard feature. They went to a full-length upper handguard, protected front sight. We have this fold-down monopod mounted on a lug on our barrel band. We also have a cleaning rod now retained with a spring-loaded button versus just screwed in. And we still take the same Type 30 bayonet as the others. Yeah, but these went into service in 1939, and by 1940, multiple arsenals were building these. And this was supposed to replace the Type 38, but because of the wars in China and then eventually in the Pacific, the Type 38 production was not actually halted until around 1942, give or take, meaning that the two served together throughout the war. Again, I'm trying to give just a basic overview of the differences. There's so much I want to start saying, and I'm having to stop myself, so I apologize. One thing I want to point out, since I have talked about the mags, they had the problem with the floor plates getting lost with the Type 38s because they were two pieces. This, they went to a hinged floor plate, and they also changed the release and the trigger guard to be harder to accidentally hit. A lot of little changes like that. They are the same essential pattern. They also changed the gas relief holes up here in case of ruptured cartridges. So all kinds of fun little stuff like this. So in some ways cheaper, but other ways kind of more gadgety. But a lot of that stuff, of course, could not, or was just not worth doing as the war went on, which led to what most call the substitute, or last ditch, Type 99. It's not really a last ditch in the strictest sense, because they started building these in the very late 1943, early 1944, so more than a year before the war ended. They made about 1 million. But this was them taking the Type 99 and simplifying it as much as they could. To that end, the barrel's the same, just under 26 inches. In fact, most of these still had a chrome line bore. The bolt system is the same. The safety is the same, still has the internal 5-round magazine. It's even still hinged down here. We have sling swivels still. So the strokes are all there, but the details are all different. Starting at the muzzle, we get rid of the sight protectors. We also get rid of the cleaning rod. Still keep our Type 30 bayonet lug though. The forearm is now a separate piece, just held in with the barrel bands. They are supposed to be loose like this. The upper handguard was shortened to save on wood. The rear sight is still a peep, but now it's not adjustable. Basically, it functions the same way as the battle sight on the Type 99. These still had the Royal Chrysanthemum, but they got rid of the Type 99 roll mark on the receiver just to save that step. Most still had the grooves for a dust cover, but were not issued with dust covers. That was actually something pretty early to go away. They also took the finger grooves out of the stock. Is pretty famous with these. They have a simple undressed weld. A lot of people call these welded safeties. Truth is, all Arisakas had welded safeties, but they usually cleanly machined the weld down and then checkered it. They stopped that and just left the weld itself as kind of a de facto checkering We still have the tangs for the receiver. Another very famous feature is the nailed-on butt plate, which when I first heard about these as a kid stood out in my mind too, and they are literally just pieces of wood nailed on. They even, while retaining the rear sling swivel, went to a single screw design to save a screw. And finally, they went to a much simplified cylindrical caulking handle. When they made it a cylinder, they actually made it a little bit longer, so you had a little more leverage. So even then, when they were simplifying things, they were still thoughtful. And of course, the bluing quality, the wood quality, the finishing would go down. However, the bolt receiver barrel were, generally speaking, while maybe not as attractive looking, still as sturdy. It's only the truly, truly late war guns made in maybe late July or August that possibly are suspect. But all the ones that are fully proofed and everything, they were, if nothing else, at least safe to fire. So as a general kind of buyer's thing, what can we expect to pay, what to look for, all that good stuff. And again, if you'd like to know more details, we have individual videos on these where I really probably go into boring depth. The Type 30 here was not made in huge numbers. They made just over 550,000 rifles and just under 50,000 carbines. They're pretty rare today, and you almost never find these matching. Another thing to know with these early production Japanese guns in general, they had two sets of numbers. Serial numbers, yes, but also assembly numbers. And the only place the serial and assembly are together are on the underside of the receiver, so you really can't tell unless you take it out of the stock. So if you get one you think it may not be matching, but it seems a little weird, check out the whole assembly number concept. It may be matching and you just don't know it. Again, they never had a dust cover, so don't expect to see one with a dust cover. On the other hand, these bolt parts, the extractor and ejector, because they're very easily lost, if they're missing, you will not find originals. I don't know if he's still doing them, but Don Schlickman used to do reproductions of high quality. He's your only hope if he's still doing it, because you're not going to find parts for these. Some are also converted to trainers, so you check the bore to make sure it still has rifling and it hasn't been drilled through or anything. But at this point, these are hard enough to find. If you see one that hasn't been sporterized, I'd just grab it myself. Hard to put a price on them, but you're gonna, minimum I'd say 500, but that's just really pulling kind of out of thin air. They're just not common enough. I wouldn't really buy one as a shooter. Not saying you can't shoot them, but it's more of a collector's piece. Now the Type 38, heck yeah, if you find that one in good shape, especially all matching where you know the headspace is good, shoot it. These things are legendarily overbuilt. 6.5 is pretty findable, at least maybe not cheap, but you can find it. We use SG ammo, scammo as I call it, but not because it's a scam, it's just how my speech reads it. There are variations. These are made in a few different factories, and they produced these from 1905 till 1942, so as you can imagine, there was a lot of changes. Production numbers on these seem to be about 3 to 3.5 million, give or take. And this is kind of your quintessential Arisaka. Because these didn't have monopods or aircraft sights, you can usually find these a little bit cheaper than Type 99s. And since 6.5, at least right now, is a little easier to find than 7.7, this really is a good one to start with. The whole mum thing, that's up to you. To me, it's nice to have a collection with some mums in it, but if a gun is otherwise very attractive, not having a mum is not a deal killer, because those things have a history of their own why they were removed. Personal opinion, but there you go. Again, hard to say real price. I'd say minimum 400, going up from there depending on matching and variant and mum. You know what I mean? But yeah, this would probably be your best shot for a shooter one. And you do actually encounter quite a few Type 38 carbines as well, which are cool little handy guns. Carbine has a 19.5-inch barrel. The Type 99. This is probably the most popular one with collectors today, especially when you can find one with all the gadgets, the monopod, the aircraft sights, landing rod, dust cover, chrysanthemum. Now, by this time they really weren't doing assembly numbers, so these should be serial matching. Typically the serials are on the receiver, the front barrel band, the bolt, the firing pin, the safety knob, and the extractor. Although that's not a hard and fast rule, because these were made by a total of 9 factories, 7 in Japan, and then Korea and China. The main ones you're going to find will be Nagoya, which was series 1 through, well, 12 technically, although you're not going to find a 12. Kokura, which was series 20 through 25. Toyo Kogyo, which was series 30 through 35. But then you have other minor manufacturers like Tokijuki Kogyo, which for some reason I run into a lot more than I should based on their numbers. You have rare ones like Howa and Izuwa, and then Mukden and Jensen. But yeah, you're likely to run into one of the 3 big makers. Again, we don't really know numbers on these hardcore because records are lost, but it seems to be between about 2.5 million and 3 million, which is quite a bit considering they did not introduce these until pretty late in 1939. Again, things to look for are pretty obvious. Is it missing or does it have features? Keep in mind there's a boatload of transitional guns, so even if you see a lug down here, the rifle may never have had a bipod. Likewise, some transitional guns had the sight with the spots for the wings but didn't have them. You can usually tell if this is correct or not based on the series number. For example, series 5, 6, 7, they're transitional, and you're going to find a lot of variations. They also would drop the dust cover around this time. Again, that's a whole video in and of itself, but this is probably the one collectors really go for. If you find one with everything, expect to pay probably $700 and up now. Without a mum or a monopod and stuff, you might drop that down to $5. But even one without a mum, yeah, if it's in good shape, especially if it's still matching, you're going to look at $500. This is just the one, I think, because it's the World War II gun. Kind of like how a German Kar 98 is more desirable to most people than a World War I Gewehr. And finally, the much maligned last ditch. First off, I think these are cool because each factory instituted its shortcuts at different times, and they did different things. Like, for example, Kokura never went to the cylindrical bolt handle. So if you find a late Series 25 Kokura, it's still going to have the plum-shaped one. Kokura also never went to the single screw rear swivel. Really about the only features that seem to be on all last ditches. The wood butt plate seems to be a universal, as was the entire kind of 3-piece stock, short handguard, fixed sights. And they all had chrysanthemums. But really beyond that, I mean, some didn't even have sling swivels at all. That said, I think they're neat. You won't find as many serials on these. Typically, it'll just be the receiver and the bolt for sure. The safety and firing pin usually are, but not always. And the extractor often is not. And the front barrel band probably won't be marked at all. Generally, these are as safe to fire as any other 70, 80-year-old gun. So with the usual caveats of have a gunsmith check it out, you're about as safe as anything to fire these. In fact, most are straight vet bringbacks, and it's pretty not that difficult to find a last ditch that was never really issued. A lot of these were still sitting in crates in the home islands when the war ended, so soldiers just took them home and put them up on the mantle. So you can even find them with original Japanese grease, Japanese cosmine in the bolt and barrel, which I think is really neat. Now the downside to that, since these were mostly surrendered and not battlefield pickups, usually the chrysanthemum is ground off with a machine. But as I said earlier, if I found a nice last ditch that spoke to me, I wouldn't let the mum being ground off deter me. I might use it as a selling, a buying point to try to get a good deal at a pawn shop, but, a lot of these are missing the mum, and that's just part of the history. But it's definitely all part of the history. The concept Japan had with the last ditch, they figured after they won the war, or at least had a peace, they could always restore these to something closer to this, because if you really look at it, the differences are all things like the furniture that could be changed. But of course, that's not how it worked for them. As far as price on last ditches, all over the moon, guys. As cheap as $300 for a mismatch without mum, as much as whatever for some of the Series 12s are so rare. You can't even say. Row poles are another popular one. Yeah, it's hard to say, but average ones, high with mum and everything, maybe $500 or $600. So $300 to $600 for just a run of the mill. And again, these were made for over a year at the end of the war, so there's a lot of them. Estimates are about 1 million. I think I said that. But that gives you a basic overview. You basically have the Type 30, which you're not going to probably run into. You have the Type 38, which they made about as many of as the Type 99. Those are the two you're probably going to run into, and all of those are as safe to shoot as anything. And what's neat about Japanese guns, the vast majority are bringbacks. They're not imports, so most of them will not be import marked. And so they have that added history of being a vet bringback, which again is just, to me, part of the cool factor. Well, hey, I hope this helps some. Please, if you have any questions about buying your first or second Arisaka, put them in the comments below and we'll do our best to answer them. And if this kind of got you intrigued about Arisakas, check out our playlist. I've got a full Japanese playlist of boring historical videos covering all kinds of weird variations and flavors. But again, it's been a passion of mine for over 20 years. If you could, as always, like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, we would greatly appreciate it if you would check out the link to our Patreon page. With that said, I'll let you go for today. I appreciate you tuning in. This is Misha, and also on behalf of Jay, we will both catch you very soon next time.